All right, as we often do on Mondays, we want to take a look at some of the news items that were buzzing over the weekend, and to do so with our panel of pundits here at the Family Research Council. So joining me now to go over some of the latest news are Casey Harper. He's a managing editor for broadcast at the Washington Stand, and Quena Gonzalez. He's a senior director of government affairs here at the Family Research Council. Gentlemen, Casey, Quena, thank you so much for joining me. We appreciate you coming on board with us today.
Glad to be with you, Jody.
All right, let's start with the government shutdown. A lot of news buzzing all around. Quena, let me throw that to you. How are things looking from your viewpoint right now?
Yeah, Jody. So after Democrats shut down the American government for longer than the flood of Noah, it's now on day 41. We are waiting to see how and where, how the Senate Democrats will come to the table. They signaled last night on Sunday evening that they would. They provided 8 votes that were required for an early procedural vote that would begin the process of reopening the government. But there are several more procedural votes that must follow. And some of those are at the 60-vote threshold. So we have several more hurdles to clear. And in between those votes are mandatory debate time that unless the Senate unanimously waives its rules, meaning no senator objects, will have to be instituted 30 hours of debate and then time for the bill to ripen before they can have a final vote. So we may be looking at the end of the week. We, of course, have Veterans Day tomorrow, Tuesday. So all of that is in the mix. It may be the end of the week or even this coming weekend before the Senate can vote to reopen the government. And then remember, the House has been waiting for 41 days for this as of today. And so the House would have to come in and vote on that bill again before it goes to the president.
Yeah, I just spoke with a member of the House earlier today, and he told me, he said that they have been called in. So right now, with all the delays in the airports, many of them, I'm sure, are trying to get back there, but that is underway. So, Quena, let me ask you this before I jump over to Casey. You mentioned a couple, but are there any other pretty big hurdles that need to be overcome as we try to get the government reopened?
The hurdles are mostly political at this point. The broad outlines of the deal have been hammered out, and enough Democrats have signaled, including Dick Durbin, who's the number 2 Democrat in the Senate, have signaled that they will vote for this broad outline deal, that we're really just waiting for the process to play out. The Senate, remember, is the cooling saucer, right? The House is popularly elected, the Senate represents the states, and it was intended by the founders so that if there was a mass populist move, sort of a reactionary bill moving through the process, the Senate could slow it down. What that means is that almost every senator has, on almost every bill, every senator has the option to slow things down. And of course, there's a deep divide in the Senate right now over this process and over this bill. In particular, there are a number of Democrats who are very upset that this bill is moving forward. So any one of them could shut it down or slow it down, as I said, into the weekend. There are a couple of Republicans who, as of today, are demanding amendment votes on things that are priorities to them. That is sort of being worked through by Republican leadership. But the point is that in the Senate, to proceed quickly, you need what's called unanimous consent. That means everybody agrees to move very quickly. And in a deeply divided Senate where the Democrats don't even agree with one another, it's very hard to see that coming together quickly.
Yeah, that's very unlikely. And I do want to come back here in just a few moments about the divide that's taking place among the Democrats over all of this. But Casey, let me come over to you. What kind of response are you hearing really from both sides of the aisle from this right now?
Well, I think we'll stay on topic here, Jody, with speaking to that Democrat divide. I mean, House Democrats are furious. They feel like they have been making the case in their districts for weeks now about how keeping the line here is what's necessary to save millions of Americans from their health care premiums going up. This issue is so important that they were willing to shut down the government. People have already suffered. People have lost their jobs. Flights canceled. People did not getting food stamps. They've taken this really bold stance. They've doubled and tripled and quadrupled down. And then suddenly over the weekend, some Senate Democrats behind closed doors come out and say, oh, well, I guess we're just going to reopen it anyway, even though we didn't get what we wanted. And so it says a few things about them. It says that They are very divided, as I think you're about to hit on now. But also, it raises the question of whether Democrats actually ever thought that it was possible to get what they wanted, because they put up this big fight, they drug it out, they went to the media covered for them, but when it came down to it, they pretty much, the moderate Democrats caved without getting the concessions that they asked for. And we've always known from the beginning that those concessions were outlandish. They were very unrealistic. Those Obamacare subsidies that Republicans have never voted for, and the idea that Republicans would vote for them now when they're in the majority, it was always far-fetched. And so it raises the question, did they actually think they could get anything, or were they just trying to make a big fuss for the base? And man, we knew the Democrats were divided, but this just highlights it may be even worse than we thought.
Yeah, so two more questions for you, then I want to jump back over to Quena. So what does this mean for the Democrat strategy, as you were just referencing, and what does this mean? Do you have anything that you're hearing right now in relation to Chuck Schumer? I'm reading he's under a lot of pressure.
He is. He's not voted for this backroom deal, but he's still being blamed for it. And at a certain level, as a leader, you're taking the responsibility for what happens, even if it's not explicitly your fault. And he's taking a lot of flack. This all has really happened because earlier this year, I believe in March, Schumer voted for a CR, clean CR, and he just got lambasted by the base. They were very furious with Schumer for going along with the Republican plan to keep the government open. And so he's so afraid of them now that he's revealing that there's kind of two strategies within the Democratic Party, because there's at least two parties, although you could make the case that there's more divisions than that. The far left wing of the party, their strategy is to basically burn it all down and do whatever it takes to stop Donald Trump, because they consider President Trump a fascist who is on the verge of destroying all democracy for all time. And so there's no way you could go too far to stop Trump. They're that extreme. And then there's the moderate Democrats, and I think Schumer's trying to bridge this divide, who are sort of operating in business as usual, trying to fight for their priorities, things like health care and the ACA subsidies, which made this a way for the moderate Democrats and the far left Democrats to unite, because Democrats have always cared a lot about health care. So it was a uniting issue, but when these moderate Democrats did what they've always done, it just inflamed this increasingly angry and increasingly far left wing of the Democrat Party.
Quena, what are you hearing in terms of the future of Chuck Schumer? Do you think he's in trouble over this, or is he going to survive?
He's been in trouble all year. There was actually a CR earlier this year, I think it was in March, that Republicans put forward. And like this one, by the way, that one was simply a continuation of existing funding levels. So it wasn't like Republicans, who are in the majority in the House and the Senate, put forward this really aggressive bill with all of these Republican changes that Democrats would obviously contradict. This was essentially then and now Biden-level funding of the government, clean, without really any adjustments, without any policy proposals inserted into it. And so that's what Chuck Schumer in March voted for. He was part of providing 7 or 8, a handful of Democrat votes for that CR in March, that continuing resolution. He learned his lesson. The base came out for him with knives. They really, really, really wanted to fight, as Casey said. The other point that I would make is that this is politics. It's not that Republicans are against health care. It's that Democrats see the COVID-era Biden subsidies for Obamacare, which went way up under President Biden, as a stick with which to beat Republicans. And for once, I'm glad to say Republicans stuck together and said, no, we're not buying that deal. As Casey said, we've never voted for it. We're not voting for it now. But what they are not voting for so far is increased COVID-era subsidies now in 2025. At the end of 2025, we don't need to be worried about COVID-era subsidies where individuals or families making up to 400% of the poverty level, we're still getting a heavy subsidy from the federal government. That's absurd, as Casey said. So both on the politics and on the policy, I think Democrats felt their back was against the wall. They had to put up a good show of a fight. But the open secret in Washington, Jody, is that they knew all along that this was a kabuki dance, and that unless Republicans caved early or President Trump sort of stomped on the Republican strategy, which he did not, they were going to lose. And so they've been looking for a face-saving way to sort of lose this fight while sort of also appearing to win it. And the media is trying to be very helpful in that.
Well, we'll see whether or not they're successful in saving face there. But we do now have a commitment on the table by Senate Majority Leader John Thune to hold a vote on these expiring Obamacare subsidies. So what are we looking at there, Quena? What's involved in what this vote is?
Yeah, so Democrats, through procedural means, could have forced this vote any number of different ways. Democrats want to vote on a very deeply unpopular Democrat bill to extend these COVID-era subsidies, which, by the way, Jody, we know pay for abortions and pay for gender transition procedures and have all kinds of waste, fraud, and abuse in them. So this is not a popular stance. The Democrats call it health care. It is not health care. These increased subsidies are going to nefarious purposes. But yes, he did tell them weeks ago that they could have a vote up or down on their proposal. It'll go down in flames unless, again, Republicans somehow cave. And so they really didn't win much of anything, in my view. The promise to hold that vote was also tied to the vote, as I said on Sunday, to begin reopening government. And also there were three funding bills, 3 of the 12 funding bills that have made it through the Senate Appropriations Committee will also be ultimately approved. And that is a bit of a concession because those are bipartisan bills that were negotiated directly, Republicans and Democrats, in order to clear this 60-vote threshold. So there are some things in those bills that we don't like, and then that will go back over to the House, probably for a quick vote and then on to the president. But overall, the Republicans have come out ahead on this.
So is there any message? I know our viewers and listeners are highly engaged. Is there any message that they need to convey to their members of Congress right now?
Absolutely. The Democrats and their friends in the liberal media have been beating the drum that this is about health care. But what this is really about are increased subsidies that were put in place under COVID that are now being used, particularly in blue states, to pay for abortions and pay for gender transition procedures. So if people go to the website and click the link, they will find that we have set up a way at FRC Action for them to contact their members of Congress and say, these subsidies shouldn't be extended, but if they are extended, they should never again be used for abortions and gender transition procedures. And it's really important for people to weigh in. Tens of thousands of emails have been sent to members of Congress, but this point needs to be driven home because that policy question, Jody, is a jump ball right now. And Democrats are continuing to try to bludgeon Republicans eventually to come over to their side on that issue.
All right, great point. Well, I encourage our viewers, listeners, take that very personally and reach out to your members of Congress. I know the government shutdown has been by far and away the biggest news item over the weekend and will be going into this week, but it's not the only thing. So another item real quickly with just a couple of minutes left. The sports gambling crisis. Casey, this is kind of making a lot of waves out there. What can you share with us about it?
Yeah, it's getting out of hand, Jody. We're having yet another sports gambling crisis, this time in Major League Baseball, where 2 pitchers for the Cleveland Guardians have, this is allegedly, but according to the Department of Justice indictment, which I have right here on my desk, they unsealed it today. And what this indictment showed, allegedly, is that these 2 pitchers were working with their co-conspirators to purposefully throw either a ball instead of a strike or to throw a certain speed to basically have their co-conspirators win bets and place bets on things. So people who don't gamble, you may know that you can bet on who will win a game, and that's kind of intuitive. But the way gambling is now, you can actually bet on very specific minor things in the game. They're called prop bets. So you can bet whether this pitcher's first pitch will be a strike or a ball, or whether their pitch will be over 94.5 miles per hour. So you can bet on very specific nuanced parts of the game that don't even really significantly impact who's going to win or lose, right? And so in this case, they were purposely doing things, and they won up to rig the outcomes, and then they won up to $500,000 by this really illegal scheme.
Wow. All right, and just 30 seconds or so, I also saw that the International Olympic Committee is banning biological men from competing in 20 seconds or so.
Yeah.
Either of you have a comment on that?
Well, so I just want to point out that, sorry, Kane, I'll take it here, but they're kind of coming out and saying, well, we haven't made our official decision, but the Times and other places are reporting that they're going to ban transgender women from competing in these things. So we'll keep an eye on that. But a lot of other leagues are doing this since the U.S. Supreme Court weighed in on the side of sanity on this issue.
Wow. Casey Harper, Quena Gonzalez, two great leaders at Family Research Council and beyond. Thank you so much for joining me today on Washington Watch. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Jody.